And actually, yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am going to share the short version of the agenda here in the chat. And then I'm going to share a link to the annotated agenda that has a little more. No, is that it? No, oh, weird. Okay, hold on. Well, what I wanted to start with actually was the check-in. One of the things was just to hear from the two of you, and I'll share also if you were able to share the the update that I drafted just to send to stakeholders around like where we were at that time with the our work with OSSI, and if so, like if you heard back from anybody.
I would just say I did not, and the reason is I had actually just sent something out on it prior.
Okay.
And I was gonna, and then I was gonna send it in the next one, which should have been sort of soon, except then it got delayed. So, but I still am going to.
Did you get feedback on the one you sent out?
I didn't specifically ask for it. It was more like a news story. But whenever I've talked about it, people are, I mean, I would say losing it is not a big deal for most of my constituents. It's not a big concern.
Right.
I mean, and I think people in general are excited about the idea that there would be a dashboard that will be far more informative.
Okay. So, but basically, nothing of note, sounds like.
I think it's important to note that people really want the dashboard. I think that's of note, and that those are issues that people really care about.
How has that been conveyed?
Well, I had conveyed it in the previous newsletter.
But I mean, when you say people want how do they convey to you?
So we've had two different presentations at the Ward 3 EdNet. So that's what I'm drawing it on, as well as more informal stuff.
Got it. How about you, Ebony Rose? You are muted.
But I do intend to still send out the one that you developed, Emily, and is
it still relevant? I guess so. You would have to.
So I probably have to update the tense or something.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ebony Rose.
No worries. I mean, I go to most of my ANC meetings, and I shared at the West 7 Ed Council meeting. I've not gotten any feedback around this. It's not the thing that's most pressing at the moment for a bunch of people. I did let the Ed Council know that they are on the list to be engaged by OSSI. And so they are looking forward to that. I also invited them to flag for me if there was anyone that was overlooked as we were compiling that list to send to OSSI. And so they didn't have any additions to that list, but they are looking forward to further engagement.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. I think the folks that we listed on there, it'd be nice to let them know. And then to give them that overview, just so they have like some context. So that's a good maybe follow-up email for the board, for board members, if they haven't sent it out, or whether they've sent it out already or not, to initial stakeholders that, if they added a group or a set of stakeholders, that it might be good to like just let them know.
Can I just note, and this may be relevant to a subsequent conversation. I think when we made that list of stakeholders, I know when I added names to that list, it was for people that would be interested in commenting and discussing the overall proposal. Insofar as OSSI is proposing to divide up the engagement. So there's one part that's about how do you identify the lowest performing 5%, and another one for everything else. I think the number of groups that would be interested and should be engaged on the first is much smaller. And it's part of the reason why I really would love to see us have a joint engagement, which is how we did it last time, to be on both. But we can get to that.
Yeah. Okay. I actually, so I have only sent it out to principals and LSAT and PTO chairs in my ward. And interestingly, only heard back from one of my adult ed school leaders who's like, yeah, we don't get rated, but this is really interesting. Glad you guys are working on this. And then one of my schools that, you know, gets 1 star or did consistently, they responded and they were, you know, thankful for the communication. Other than that, I haven't, but I did have a meeting subsequently with one of the groups that I had listed, a student advocacy group. And I was like, oh yeah, I should probably like send you this information. So I'm going to do that. And so I think what I'm going to do is send another email to the board, just saying, maybe, you know, tweaking that original message and suggesting that we send that update out. Okay. And then the other thing,
Also, can I ask one other thing on that? I wonder, you know, it'd be useful on something like that if a note could go out, because I know it's hard for people to get this into their schedule. On some very specific things like this being a communication to LSATs, that it could go out from the board itself, so that everybody's getting it. Does that make sense?
you mean that staff or John Paul would send it to
Yeah.
all citywide, as opposed to saying, here, send if you want?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we'd want that on everything, but it seems like it might be useful on this.
Some
Anyway,
updates. Well, maybe some updates, would it make sense for that to be part of like the newsletter, or if that's how we were gonna do it? But you're saying more targeted, Ruth?
yeah, I was talking about just to like LSAT, you know, LSAT chairs, principals.
Maybe. I think it depends. It's hard to say without a specific thing. Okay, and then the other thing, I was going to maybe have a discussion about the updates. And so Ruth, I've updated you. I've just, Ebony Rose, so you know that I've updated both, the whole committee. So talk to Jacques and Carleen and Ruth separately, just because was the nature of it, about my conversation with Jessica. So they are more or less up to date. And Ruth, Ebony Rose and I started to have a conversation about it before this meeting. So, and I guess, you know, one of the things I had spoken with Jessica about before Monday's leadership meeting was just that as a co-chair for this committee, both Jacques and I are finding it difficult to like flesh out this work plan for our committee, because it wasn't clear to us what our role, if any, is with OSSI. I think the idea was going into this that we would have a role, and now it's sounding like OSSI is saying, no, you don't. So I think we need to talk about 2 things really. One is, what is the work of this committee? And it's very entangled with, I think, the statement that we heard from Dr. Grant last night, that as far as she is concerned, our agencies are aligned at this point on next steps. And I think, as I was conveying to Ebony Rose, and I said this, I don't think I've said this to Jessica yet. So it's an ongoing conversation at this point. I don't think the committee members feel that way, like we are aligned. So I think we need to have that conversation before we can get to our work plan, because our work plan really is dependent on whether we're doing anything with OSSI or not. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, the first, one of the most important things about our work plan is to be in regular touch with OSSI about the implementation of this, so that as it goes forward, we're part of it and we can keep our own stakeholders up to date about what's going on. And that's like a first part of the work
So,
plan.
I mean, my thought, and I think this was what Jacques and I were hoping, or we assumed, was we would at least be able to have an initial conversation with Donna to ask what that could look like, or with Dr. Grant, whoever was more appropriate to talk to about that. Just even something that basic of, how do we keep stakeholders updated? How do we know what's going on? I think the responses, and Ebony Rose, you can jump in. So they are saying we can be part of the or we can attend the engagement sessions. So I don't know if they've conveyed to you leadership about, how would we be looped in? Is that something that's already happening? Are they going to send us invitations? Like, just so we can be, I would like to be available, so is that something that I am going to be able to see a calendar ahead of time? So that's a really sort of straightforward logistical question. But I guess my question to you, Ruth, and I do wish the other committee members were here. Is that enough? I think it's good. But then is there no channel of communication? That's my fear. It sounded to me, speaking with you, Ebony Rose, and with Jessica, that like, it's a one-way street at this point. Like we can observe and we can take from it what we take from it, but they are not at this point. Sounded like Dr. Grant did not want us reaching out directly to her or to Donna, which I don't know if that's happened before, so it just, that to us alone feels not in alignment. I will just speak for me, and I'm pretty sure Ruth feels the same way. Go ahead, Ruth, saw your hand.
Can I give a quick voiceover before you respond, Ruth, just so you know what I shared? So a couple things. So we did have our leadership meeting with OSSI earlier this week. I think a few things are true. So one, yes, I did, and I asked to be treated as the.
Ruth, are you still listening?
Yes, I'm just getting a pen. Sorry, I'm here.
And you'll get most of this in the readout. It has been a week, but so it'll be echoed there as well. But Dr. Grant shared the following things. One is, in her mind, there are 3 concurrent work streams that are due to the board between June and July. This work, social studies work, and now attendance work, because of the legislation that was about to be before the council, which is totally in our purview. There are a few things that are squarely within our purview. This is one of them. And so as far as OSSI is concerned, they feel that there are very aggressive timelines around getting all 3 of these things done, especially within the timeframes that they have committed to with the board. I use the best way I have to convey it is I use the analogy of this is like a relay race. And so we are at the leg in the relay race, where our leg was a bunch of, was everything before the resolution was submitted. I think OSSI sees the resolution, which I would say is appropriate for them to see the resolution as where the board stands and the will of the board. But they see the resolution as the will of the board, and they see their work at this point is to lead the engagement and then to come back to us with final recommendations. I think they were fairly clear at the meeting where Donna presented, and Dr. Grant reinforced this, that from their perspective, the role of SBOE members at this time would be to participate, like be present in the engagement, not to guide the engagement, not to be a thought partner in the engagement. I think that with the exception of the request to send groups that were missing, that they look forward to engaging. And so that is my takeaway from the conversations we've had with OSSI. I also was starting to share that a couple things are true about engagements between the board and OSSI. Right now, there was actually another response that had nothing to do with STAR given around OSSI and board member engagement. The representative or President Sutter and I are trying to do is do a better job of standardizing communication between OSSI and the board that's not necessarily based on project or based on personality, because I think some of it has to do with responses to individual members. And I would say that that needs to be cleaned up. I'm not going to go into further detail about that on this committee call because it's not the work of this committee necessarily. I did offer that as we are trying to navigate that, the next best solution is to have the leadership of the A&A committee come to our next check-in with OSSI to have a conversation. I know that that invitation was not extended for this week. And quite frankly, one of the, I don't know if the reasons why were shared, but I'm happy to be transparent about the reasons why. It actually was our second meeting with OSSI. And it was just a tight meeting. We would not have been able to get into all the questions, and we were trying to create an opportunity and ferret out what the best opportunity would be before we defaulted to this had to go through the leadership in this way. And so we're trying to navigate that. I think our expectation I wasn't in the conversation between Representative Gassoy and Representative Sutter, but I think our expectation is to do our best, knowing that our work plans are not set in stone, but to try to predict what are the things we will need to do to get to a place that all of the work of the committee is reflected. I do think, and I would suspect, based on what we've heard from OSSI so far, that to your question, Representative Gassoy, should you expect like a calendar and invites? I would say the answer is probably yes. That they would say, here's the engagements that we have planned. I don't believe those invitations have gone out yet, and they have a calendar to share yet, but I would not, I believe that information is forthcoming, and that we would be, first on the list of invites to those things. So I think that's everything that I shared with you earlier. I don't think I left anything out. If I did, it's just because it's been a long day, and I'm very tied to the sun, and so I'm struggling today more than others.
That sounds right. I mean, I think you and I got more into the weeds on it, but I think that's where we're about to go now. So I think that was a good overview.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Ruth. I just wanted to share that with you.
No, I appreciate it.
Before
Yeah.
you would have the same context.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
So, so let me just register a number of things that I think are issues. And they are issues, and we should ideally find ways around them. First of all, and let me just say, I think Superintendent Grant has really been great at trying to reach out. I enjoyed my conversation with her. I want to believe that she is really eager to cooperate with us. I am very eager to work with them. I worked with OSSI the first time around, and it was not very satisfactory. The result of which is that we got a whole system that a lot of people have never been satisfied with or felt like they were part of. I don't want that to happen again. So in that spirit, a couple of things. First, I think there's been a representation based on, I guess, Donna's presentation to the AA committee. There's been a representation first at the performance oversight hearings, both by our president and by the superintendent, that what was being proposed by OSSI was basically in alignment and fine with the board and the committee. I do not feel that way at all, and I don't think most of the people on the committee feel that way at all. I suspect most of the people on the board wouldn't feel that way at all, except we haven't really talked to the board about it because there've been all these process issues. Like, first we wanted to go through the committee. We wanted to go through Jessica. We wanted to go through the leadership meeting. Anyway, that meeting, those two meetings, Donna presenting to us and then the oversight hearings are 2 weeks ago. And there hasn't been a vehicle to express the concerns that we have. And I think it's really important for those at OSSI to understand that these concerns exist. And I'm not sure that they do. So let me just say a few things about what I feel like may not be in alignment. And I think they're important. One is, one of the very important issues from the board was there should not be, for all schools in the city, a summative score. We understand that the federal law requires that OSSI has to name 5% of the schools that are, by their measurements, the lowest performing, and the 5% where specific groups are performing the worst relative to other places. That's the federal law, and we need to do that. But we were very clear in our resolution, whatever formula is used to identify the schools most in need, that should not be considered a quality score that's applied and given to all schools in the city. It's what we had a lot of discussion about. And I think it's very important to understand where OSSI is on that, because it's I feel like we're not getting a clear answer on it, and we should. We deserve to know what they're pursuing, and the public needs to know, deserves to understand as well, and we need clarity on it. So that's one thing that I think is just unclear, and if it seems not in alignment with the resolution, and if it is, let's know.
I think a couple things are I should say. The first is I came to this meeting to probably try to get a better understanding of where you all were going on your work plan. I did not come to negotiate on behalf of OSSI. So I
didn't assume that you were. I'm just putting
that on the table because I received the emails. I know the list of places where you all feel alignment has not been achieved. But I don't, I quite frankly don't have anything more to offer than what I've offered as far as where OSSI is on this. I also don't know if, as far as my personal perspective, and actually my individual perspective, and I started to share this with Representative Crisoi earlier. I think one of the things that I would expect from OSSI is actually not to say to us, here is exactly where we are on all the things, because in my experience as not just a community member, but someone who has been a community leader, is that it's particularly off-putting and frustrating. And I'm hoping for, and it may be a naive hope, but I'm hoping for OSSI to do genuine engagement, to genuinely listen to the people who come to their meetings. Granted, no, we will not be running those meetings. We're not allowed to frame those meetings, but I want them to go in with an open ear and really hear from people instead of saying, all right, here is where we are as OSSI. And so that's the perspective I'm trying to maintain until proven otherwise. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they propose as far as who, the actual list of engagements, in addition to being able to attend a session or two before I make an assessment about where OSSI is on this. And I also shared that some of the things that I think are different this go round as opposed to last go round, which is I think we would be selling ourselves short if we did not recognize the amount of work that was done by the board in advance of OSSI taking this leg of the relay race. I don't know that was necessarily the same experience the last go round, because I will say that I'll speak from a Ward 7 perspective. A lot of the engagement that was done in Ward 7 was because of myself and the community organization that I was a part of. It wasn't because of Austin, and it wasn't because of the board. And I will say that what has happened with the board with this go round is definitely a much stronger showing than that. And so that also makes me hopeful for what ultimately is brought to us. And everything does have to be brought to us to be more reflective of what community members would like to see than the system we have passed. So I did not come here to defend or negotiate with Aussie. I wanted to be upfront and show the parts that I think were relevant to the committee's work. So you knew what we knew. And that's my most honest offering. I did, and I told Emily, I said, I'm really just here to listen to how we can help move forward with the work plan, given I don't have the answers to those questions. But I am aware of the concerns. And so I think it's actually really important that we think about what that looks like, because this is important work from the board, and it's on a type timeline that we set. And I think we've had Aussie commit to, and I want to keep them committed to that.
So I appreciate that you're here to talk to us about those concerns, which you did earlier. I'm making these comments.
I'm not here to talk to you about the concerns. I shared it. I'm really
I appreciate that you came here to hear what you came to hear about. I was making my comments not to you. I was making them because we're in the committee and we're raising our responses. We're providing the rest of the committee with our updates and responses to what has happened so far. So this is not directed at you. But in response to your very last comment, I will say this. I also would certainly hope that Aussie would be genuinely engaging. My concern is that both at the work session where Donna made the presentation, and then again in the oversight hearing where the question was put to Superintendent Grant, what did seem to be put forward was the idea that there would be a score that was going to be given to every school. It wasn't going to be a star, but it was going to be a score. That's why I'm concerned. I agree with you. I hope they're going into these sessions with an open mind, but that's what concerned me. But let me just go now to the process part, to the other parts of this, which is the process on this, sort of the collaboration or the engagement. As it's set up, it's engagement set up by Aussie, as you say, run by Aussie. And the end result of that, and this is exactly what happened last time, is the conversation is, at least last time, I don't know that it would be this time, was very steered, the end result of which people did not feel heard. And certainly, I would say for a lot of people, the results of the engagement weren't fully credible, but there wasn't that much, and it was a different kind of engagement. So my point is not so much to compare it, but to say, insofar as Aussie plans to have all this engagement, to be involved in it is to build up the credibility. So I just want to say that. But, and a third thing I want to say is, I do think, and I understand that Aussie is on a timeline, which I'm very sympathetic to. I do think it's important, though, to have the engagement around the ESSA categories, which is what is being done immediately, should be done alongside of the discussion around what do people want to know on the report card. Now, I understand they're not going to be able to produce a full report card proposal by August, but people's views about the meaningful differences framework, about the bottom 5%, all that is related to whether or not other information is going to be available on a report card. So I think if people don't understand that there's going to be alternative ways to understand school quality, people will have a different view of that summative score. So I think, and so that's one thing. The second thing is, if the discussion, if from now until August or now through July, the only discussion is around how do we identify the lowest performing 5%, I just don't think that's a discussion that's going to engage most of the city. And it's a little bit of it's a very, very technical discussion that really affects a very small number of schools. And I think actually that's not a great use of time. So I think that's an issue.
I would
Um,
also just add to that, Ruth, though, it's hard to imagine how you're going, I mean, even for us when we vote, for me to think about voting on the formula alone without thinking about hearing about how it will be displayed, that's such an important piece of the puzzle, right? And such an important part of the resolution is, where does that go? And so part of how I think this is what you're saying, Ruth. Part of how I vote on the formula that they present, the meaningful differentiation, will depend on where it goes for me anyway. So if it's going to be on the first thing people see, I might vote on it very differently than if it's a tab somewhere on this larger document or this larger platform, right? So I know that, so the thing that I'm grappling with, again, and thinking about our work plan and just our role and how we, to your point, Ruth, even what are we conveying to the rest of the board about where the committee stands, is I understand that OSSI can do what they want, so these would be our recommendations, I guess, for how they proceed, and they can say, thank you very much. That's not what we're doing. But I guess the thing is, we are voting. And this is, I don't want to speak for Representative Patterson, but I did include it in sort of what I was hoping would be conveyed to OSSI leadership. So I think I can, because he was part of that conversation, which was that our objective for weighing in at this point, this seems really pivotal at this point, would be so that when we get to July, we've been on the same page from the beginning, right? Like there aren't surprises, there aren't questions about how did you get from here to here, right? And we're not feeling secure in that right now. It doesn't feel that way. It really stood out to me when Dr. Grant said that it feels good to be in alignment. And I just felt like it would feel good to be in alignment. We're not feeling that yet. So, and I don't feel like we're far, honestly. I just think that this keeping us at arm's length makes it worse. It makes it feel very, I don't know, like I said, like last time around, even though this wasn't the position I was in, it has a similar feeling, the arm's length piece.
And one other issue I just wanted to throw out is the issue of the timeline. So what we've gotten from OSSI so far is a timeline that takes us through August on the 5% issue. But part of what we also said in our resolution was the importance of kind of nailing down and agreeing on the report card before the end of the calendar year. So I would really hope that we would be aiming to vote on that in November, just to give us sort of some room, with December as sort of a fallback. But that also, I mean, that's part of what we put forward in the timeline, and I feel very strongly about that.
So given that, I mean, the other thing that I was hoping to get insight from the meeting, the Monday meeting on, was like, is there a way to provide OSSI with just written sort of a proactive list of sort of what our concerns are, but maybe not in the form of concerns. Like if we could do it you know, as,
They are concerns.
okay. Yeah,
I mean, ideally, you'd have a direct communication between the committee leadership and OSSI so that these things can be discussed openly, fully, candidly, with the goal of ending up with, you know, a good understanding and a good solution. I mean, that's really what I think needs to happen. That needs to be opened up. Then, because
yeah,
it's obviously it's going to be very artificial and not conducive to everything good if you know, if everything has to go through a, you know, a written format like that. I mean, I do think there needs to probably be something written at this point that sort of acknowledges that there is not alignment, since there seems to be a lot of public statements that there is. And I think so it needs to be clear what is not aligned.
right, if that's true. I mean, I guess what my hope was we, in a
Right.
conversation, we could find out, actually,
Right.
we're just misunderstanding something. So
Yeah,
I think the main thing is, for me, is, you know, to your point before, Ruth, about the summative, what it feels like to me is that on the slides, and then also in Dr. Grant's responses at the oversight hearing, that it's very plausible that the framing of the engagement will be around, you know, should we do this or not? Like, should we have it on? Do you want this on the front or not? You know, and that that's kind of what happened, it felt like last time, where the way, I don't know. I think that is definitely not in alignment with our recommendations. So this is where I'm grappling. We can't tell them what to do. So maybe that's not what we're doing. We kind of just want to make it clear what we are, what our recommendations were, so that doesn't get lost in the shuffle. And so that it's not this false sense of, well, the state board is part of asking these questions that are not actually what we would ask. Does that make sense? Or is that not quite right? I feel like it's not quite right.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah,
I mean, I think it would be great to have the conversation that allows you as the leadership to ascertain, you know, where we are and aren't aligned. I think that's important for us to know, and for our members to know, and for the public to know.
so I guess what
And
I would,
ideally, I hope you're right, that we're basically all on the same page, and then we can all just get on the same page and feel very confident about that. That'd be the best. And hopefully that's what it is.
so this is what I suggest, actually, is I think that one meeting is really important, you know, and that's what I would like to request the leadership, our leadership, you, Ebony, and Jessica.
But you all are, I've already said that you all will have one meeting. It will be at our next check-in. I think
With
what
Dr.
think what
Grant,
I'm-
right?
Sorry.
Next month, but that's with Dr. Grant, and that's next month. And so
Yeah,
I
and
guess
that's-
what I'm saying is, I
It's a
don't
time-
think we should not
But-
wait a month. And then
but
also,
I don't
Yeah.
want to be, dishonest, and I don't want to be disingenuous. OSSI has been very clear, and you're right, we cannot tell them what to do. And so my worry is that this committee, with this important work that is moving very quickly, will not have a work plan. And that we're going to stay in a holding pattern of, if we can't talk to OSSI, if we can't do a work plan. OSSI is not budging on holding a meeting with the committee leadership. And it is not because the leadership is saying, don't talk to the members. We are trying, and we're working on that, but I don't want that perfect or that ideal to stand in the way of, like, what does it look like to get work done. So that honestly was the compromise. It was the best we could do.
Wait, the compromise is that we join you once a month, or not even, like
You
probably,
come to the next
yeah. So
leadership
we
meeting with
Yeah.
Aussie. And
So
so I guess I think one of the things as I'm listening, I don't, is there an assumption built in, or should I have an assumption built in that you think Aussie doesn't understand the resolution? Or do you think or is there something else that's, because or is there something else that you all see as a gap?
Aussie has described us as being aligned with them, and President Sutter has described us as aligned with them. And I've raised several ways in which I actually don't think we are aligned. I hope we are. I hope it's all misunderstanding. But yeah, my understanding so far is there's a number of ways in which we're not aligned. And so if they think we are, they need to know otherwise. I mean, I think that's only fair.
But I don't think and maybe that's the difference in interpretation. I don't think the alignment, or anyone can state an alignment as far as where Aussie is going to end up. I do think that most of the things that Donna said to us, and I particularly appreciate of most of the Aussie employees that come before us. I particularly appreciate Donna's communication style. I think she's actually super clear. I think she's super prepared. I think she's super detailed. When I sat through that presentation, I will say that I do think they understood both the letter and the spirit of that resolution. I also think that the majority of things, there was alignment. I don't think that Aussie everything they want that we want. And so maybe it's that we should just ask that Aussie, like the expectation, we can communicate offline to Aussie that we think that's not perfect alignment, but I don't actually think, I think I don't actually know what more can be offered at this point, because I think it would be out of line for Aussie to say, well, here's exactly what we're going to end up. And the only way we'll know if there's full alignment is when they present where they're going to end up. I also have an expectation, and I'm going to be honest in saying I can't remember where exactly it came from, but and it might actually have been from Dr. Grant, where she said she wants to bring us something that we can vote up. We clearly only get an up or down vote. We are an advise and consent board. I don't expect surprises from Aussie. I expect there to be built in a time with the board where they come back and say, hey, like, not only can you sit in the engagement, but like, here's where we are. I know they're going to bring that stuff to a working session. I know that'll be part of regular updates from Aussie. So I don't expect a surprise. And I personally would not allow a surprise to happen. Like there will be checkpoints where we as the leadership say, hey, like Dr. Grant, update us on this, or can you address this? And that can be built in. I also think it's very important that this committee can also think about, if it's not a perfect world, if Aussie is not saying, I want to meet with you tomorrow, if they don't come back and address the list of places that you all have identified as not being currently aligned, that we don't have a way forward. I just think it's really important to have a way forward. And so I am a little concerned that they're outside of that, like that is a sticking point, and it's going to be a sticking point for them too. So I don't know how to.
Well, I think we're mixing up some things here. The as we all say, they don't have to do anything that we say. We know that, and it's part of why it's important for all of us to have a working relationship. My first concern was simply to your question, do I think that they don't understand the resolution where we are? I don't know. What I do know is that it's being presented as though there's good alignment between the board and Aussie. I don't know on what, and I'm saying that the board presented it that way and Aussie is presented that way. I think there's a number of ways, important ways, in which that's not the case. And that just needs to be clear to OSSI. You're right. They don't, I haven't been in the conversations with them. Are they aware that the way in which they're describing the scoring is not amenable?
They are aware that it's not, I think OSSI is keenly aware, which is why when Donna presented in that presentation, she said, she labeled that as, here's one of the places we are not.
That's not
in alignment.
That's not
I think OSSI is keenly aware. I think, and I think that when Dr. Grant says alignment, she's looking at the majority, not the perfection. I think it's a matter of perspective. So I can say my perspective is Dr. Grant, Dr. Sutter see the places where we are in alignment. And so in an effort to get to that working relationship you're talking about, you're using optimistic language. And they're saying that majority of this stuff, we're good. We agree on, we can get done. A dashboard, yes, we can get done. There is alignment. That does not mean we are fully aligned. And so that's the difference between how I interpret it and how you interpret it. But I can understand where there's a difference.
And the council, I think, also had some questions about how to interpret. So
I didn't watch the oversight hearing, so that's why I'm not speaking to that.
Yeah, no, I think if you watched it, you might have some sense of that. But I think the important thing is it should be clear, and so probably needs to be in writing. And that's one thing. The other thing I would say is, while you're right, Ebony Rose, that some of this won't be clear until the end of the process, part of it's about the process. In other words, if there's not going to be the timeline on developing the report card, I think that is an issue. I'll also say there are parts that would go in the report card. For example, I think across our board and across everybody we talk to, one of the most important measures to include in the on that dashboard was climate. Now we know getting to a climate measure, that's not simple. If we have a real interest, a real commitment to having that done in time for the next report card, so that's a year from December, things need to start moving. It's not going to be done. I get that. But if there's no, we don't have any timeline about the report card.
This is why I'm saying that I think it's really important for the committee to lay out its work plan, because I see, and let me tell you maybe I should be more clear about what I mean by that. So I see OSSI's slides, their presentation, as it being in writing, where we are aligned and where we're not. That's how I see it. I totally think that it's important to close communication gaps. And I think if there are places where OSSI is saying they don't have enough information to do something, they don't have enough information to set forth a timeline, I think it would be great if this committee could include in their work plan some activities that close the gap around having enough information to be able to do things around school climate. Like if this committee had outlined in their work, here are some of the things we can do to keep that work moving. So as we work to negotiate with OSSI a timeline and commitment around that, I think that would be valuable. So I'm not saying this is we just relinquish and say, okay, we have to wait and bite our hands until OSSI comes back with something. But I do think there is a lot of work to continue to do to realize the spirit of the resolution that was put forth. And while OSSI has been clear, they're driving the engagement, and that's well within their right. It is, whether I like it or not, or whether you like it or not. There are also things we can do from my perspective to help this along that are firmly in our court. And so I guess my hope is that we can outline what are the things we can do that keep the things firmly in our court that help with the school climate stuff, or help with the more things around SEAO, or help with the just if there are, I can't even think of what else, but I'm sure there are other things that we have not gotten commitments from that would position us well to continue improving upon not just the school report card, but accountability overall.
So I guess this is a really good example of where I feel like if there's not open communication, I would not feel comfortable doing research on the school climate, because they've said they're not going to do it. But I would feel like, I mean, I hear you. Maybe we could make an argument for it because we have all this research that we can present, but it feels presumptuous to me without the communication. So it's in that spirit.
Understanding whether they want it, I guess, is the way I would say it.
Wait, what, Ruth? Sorry.
No, that I'd be fine to do research on climate if they're interested in getting.
But that's what I mean.
So no, I'm agreeing with you.
So that's kind of exactly what I'm trying to envision when we're thinking about what are we focusing on? It's really hard to know without having that communication. I guess that is exactly it.
I'm using that as an example.
Yeah.
I'm using that as an example because what I hear you saying back to me is there are places that you have concerns about and that you would want OSSI to do work, and OSSI saying that we're not working on that right now. That's how I hear them saying it. I think if the committee was saying, like for me, like a way to open up communication would be if the committee is saying, well, all right, we don't have a timeline on that now, but here's how we can help move forward that work. That's something to communicate around. But I wouldn't even know. And that's one of the reasons I came to the meeting, because I was like, I'm trying to better understand, how and where we can clean this communication up and strengthen this communication a bit better. And so my default is to have something to offer back. And I'm not so sure outside of saying the committee has concerns and they want a meeting. We've said that. We had that conversation. President Sutter and I offered a couple of different points. The place we got to was the next leadership meeting, which is not perfect. But if it's not something that we can control, we have to figure out other ways to continue to move the work forward. And I have to have something else I can take back saying like, here's what's going on with the ANA committee, OSSI, let's work on this. And so that's my offering. And that's why I'm beating this. I don't know if it's a dead horse or what.
One last kick to the dead horse is, I just want to be clear that when you say we're not going to be able to talk to them for another month, the fact is there's already a month that's gone by. So basically,
I'm clear.
2 months. Okay. And
I'm clear. And part of that too is that we had that, and we can talk about this offline, but that I'm clear that it will be next month. Yes. But that's also one of the reasons I'm saying, I hope you all are still doing the work plan, because we're allocating resources based on the work plan, and we want to be able to communicate with OSSI. Here's the work of the ANA committee.
Right. And I think we're in a bit of a circle here, because I think it's very hard to figure out what should be in our work plan. I'm just being totally honest and candid. I'm not really sure what it's, we could do some PR, we could sort of do some public promotion about why
presumptuous as the board at other times. I think sometimes exercising leadership is just saying, here's what I would like to see in the world. And I think we have that prerogative. And I think there are also things around assessment and accountability that go beyond the stars in this year. Like the work plan is for the year. In a perfect world, a recommendation will come back to us. We will vote it up and we would move on to more work, right? Not to say there wouldn't be questions, there wouldn't be rollout, but there's still work for the board to do around assessment and accountability. And those are conversations that live in this committee too, beyond the vote in, I don't know if I can't remember if it's June or July, there's a whole 6 months for that. And so I do think that there's a lot that we can do and we should do. I think there's opportunity. And so, and I'm inviting the committee to put together something that addresses both this work of the STAR framework, or formerly known as STAR framework. I don't know what we should call it in the interim, the report card, the dashboard, and what is the future work of the board. And that could be really exciting too.
Yeah, I am looking at the time.
But we could do some engagement around, maybe this is something around, what would a well-rounded education indicator look like, and what are the, one thing we could do is revive sort of an idea that we had that really got put off by the pandemic, to really look at the extent to which we had well-rounded education and the extent to which the over testing was really getting in the way. That would be an interesting thing to re-raise as a research project.
it's needed.
Related to, right, so you're saying two things, right? Am I hearing you right, Ruth? So one is related to the report card, which is the well-rounded education indicator. But are you also saying, looking at beyond the dashboard or whatever we're calling it, looking at testing's impact on
Well-rounded education. I mean,
more
it's sort of-
broadly? Well,
yeah,
yeah.
and specifically, I mean, I was thinking of it from the point of view of well-rounded education to sort of make that case that we need that kind of an indicator, and here's what it could look like. Likewise, we could do that around the, another thing, which is about a little bit about assessments, is I know some states are now doing assessments that are very tied to a very well-rounded ELA curriculum, and then doing the assessment strictly so that it's very closely tied to that. So it sort of creates more attention to the well-rounded issues, as opposed to just, reading comprehension as a skill that doesn't incentivize learning content. That was very poorly said, but in other words, there are states that are working on figuring out how do you incentivize the teaching of content, because that's going to help you on your test, as opposed to incentivizing drill and kill comprehension exercises, because that's what's on your test, which is where we are now.
And there's Fraser's issue that he raised that is in our resolution, actually, which is, at some point looking at an alternative to parks. That's something that maybe we could take on.
Like I see those things as solidly in the work of this committee. And again, it is all like the alternative to park is in the resolution, right? And it's not currently being taken up. I also recall when I guess it's roughly this time last year, when we were looking at the committee structures for the first time, because since we didn't have committees, and there was a question around where did the work go that was coming out of the well-rounded education committee, and it was kind of like split between committees, and it sounded like there was still more to build on and continue. I think some of those things would be worth picking up now. Like,
well, that's what I was talking about. That was the research part.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm agreeing with you, and so like I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of those things, because I know I don't know how to operate in a perfect world. I know how to operate in the world that I have, and I am really concerned that we're not going to get to a place where OSCE says like yes, and we are going to be thought partners around this. I think that's not where OSCE is, and that we still have to figure out what the communication looks like around that, and continue all of the work. That's not all, but as much of the work as we can get done around many things as possible, and knowing that we're going to be at a finish line, we'll be able to say, yay, we have a new school report card mid-year. We still got the rest of the year. So
speaking of something that we actually already have, which is the research tool or the research chart that Darren has been working on. And that's something, I mean, is that something we should share with OSCE, or we should at least make accessible, or how do we want to direct further work on that, if at all? So that's another question, just putting out there. Have you had a chance to explore it all, Ruth?
Explore what?
The research chart that Darren's been working on.
Oh, not since last time. To find the sort of the best examples in the different states of things.
Yeah,
Is that here?
I'll give it to you. Here, hold on. Unless you have it handy, Darren. I think I have it here.
I mean, we talked about it last time. I haven't looked at it. I didn't know that it was still in motion.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, again, like, for instance, if we did want to pursue well-rounded education, that's something that, you know, we could ask Darren to focus on in his work. And then also another thing that, so anyway, yeah, I think we should figure out what we want to do with it anyway. If he should keep working on it, or if it's done, and if it's done, you know.
Well,
how-
maybe send that around to the committee and let's look at it. And then I sort of feel like the
Sure.
better way to continue this conversation is at a later point when we have our committee members.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, thanks, Darren. I was just posting it too.
Oh, great. Thanks, Darren.
Yeah,
So we're,
Ruth, I added all the different states, and just to quickly run through this. I know clock's counting down, but on the left side, you'll see states that either use or not use in ratings for their indicators. And if you scroll down to column E, H, and I, you'll see which states use a single summative rating or not. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions. And also I broke this up by tabs. So
Great.
there's indicator school ratings tab, teacher info, school climate, well-rounded education. I'm trying to break these up based on the recommendations in SR 22.1. But yeah, I'm happy to, if you have something that you really want to focus on. I had a great discussion with Minnesota's State Board or Department of Education on how they collect well-rounded education data and how they're thinking about including that in a formula. They don't have it yet, but we're on their radar, so I think they'll keep us up to date on how that's going. But I'm happy to reach out to other states and work with NASB on what other states are doing on a variety of things. So
okay, thank you. All right. I think, yeah, we need to kind of regroup and
And I
figure
do
out-
think, I just want to be clear. I just think we need to put something in writing that explains the concerns. No, it doesn't even have to go to OSSI, but our members need to understand that our perception as a committee is not the same as what's necessarily being put forward. People just need to understand that. Or people need to understand what our concerns are. So we can figure out how to do that, but
yeah. Okay. We know we have to do the work plan by the end of the month, so we will do that. The other thing is, you know, again, it would be helpful to have our other members here, but just is there work that would require funding? So for instance, I mean, the well-rounded education stuff that we started was a actual research project with a vendor. I wasn't crazy about how we were doing it. Honestly, I wasn't convinced that we would get results that would be particularly, I don't know, much of a value add in the big picture. So it's something to rethink, I think, but yeah, I don't know. And that's something that I think we need to get more information from John Paul on, like, when would we need to, if we wanted to engage a third-party vendor to do some kind of citywide research, when we would need to get that in by. So I'm putting that on my list.
I mean, we could also do some surveying around, you know, the usefulness of park and you know, what kind of, you know, the ways in which it's beneficial or non-beneficial, so that it would sort of give us some ideas about how to improve it, what a different, better assessment would be.
Okay, so that's a different, yeah, different topic. You're just thinking about how we might spend the money if we use.
yeah.
Yeah. Got you. Okay. Very good. I think I'm going to adjourn our meeting. So thank you for coming, Ebony Rose and Darren.
Thank you,
And
guys.
we'll be in touch. Okay, bye.
Bye all.